He looked her straight in the eyes and said those 7 words, "I don't know why I did it." Her world collapsed. Maybe you've heard these exact words. Maybe you've said them yourself. According to researchers who studied thousands of cheating confessions, this single sentence shows up in nearly 8 out of 10 cases of betrayal. But here's what they don't tell you. This phrase isn't just an excuse. It's a warning sign that started months before any physical cheating happened. 3 days before Sarah discovered her husband's affair, he texted her, "I don't know why I'm feeling distant lately." The affair didn't begin with secret hotel meetings or hidden conversations. It began with these words that Carl Jung, the famous psychologist, would immediately spot as the first crack in relationship trust. What if I told you that cheating leaves word clues months before it happens? That your partner's way of talking actually rewires their brain to justify betrayal? This isn't just a theory, it's backed by science. A Harvard study found that specific speech patterns actually come before physical cheating by about 4 months on average. Today, I'm going to show you exactly what Jung discovered about the sentence that appears before almost every relationship betrayal. And fair warning, once you hear this, you'll never listen to your partner the same way again. Have you ever wondered why good people wreck relationships they claim to value? Why someone can look you in the eyes, promise to be faithful, and then do the exact opposite? The answer isn't about desire or opportunity. It's about something Jung called our shadow side, and it's working in your relationship right now whether you see it or not. Let's break this down together, because what I'm about to share might just save your relationship before those 7 words ever come up. Carl Jung showed us that everyone has a shadow. The parts of ourselves we don't want to admit we have. The parts we hide not just from others, but even from ourselves. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Think about that for a second. The very things about ourselves we refuse to face become the invisible forces driving our worst behaviors. When someone says, "I don't know why I did it," they're not always lying. They genuinely might not understand what made them do it. Their hidden side has temporarily taken over. This gap between what we think we want and what we actually do is what Jung called psychological splitting, and it's behind most relationship betrayals. A fascinating study from Northwestern University tracked 300 couples over 5 years and found something eye-opening. In relationships where one partner eventually cheated, researchers could spot specific language patterns showing up months or even years before any physical cheating happened. The most common? Statements that distance the person from their actions, exactly like, "I don't know why." But what does this mean for your relationship? Jung believed our relationships act like mirrors, reflecting our unaddressed needs and old wounds. When these needs stay buried, they find other ways out, often destructive ones. The first sign shows up in seemingly innocent statements that create emotional distance. When your partner says, "I'm just focused on work right now," while also being emotionally absent, what they're really saying is, "My emotional energy is going somewhere else." The problem isn't the work itself, it's the emotional withdrawal that comes with it. One woman told me how her husband spent months working late, only to discover he wasn't at the office at all. The warning wasn't his absence, it was how emotionally unavailable he was, even when physically present. His hidden desires were already engaged elsewhere, long before any physical cheating. The second sign involves blaming you for things they're actually doing. When someone suddenly becomes suspicious of your behavior without reason, Jung would recognize this as them projecting their own hidden feelings onto you. Research from Boston University found that people who suddenly accuse their partners of being unfaithful are statistically more likely to be the ones actually cheating. Have you noticed this pattern in any of your relationships? That moment when someone becomes unreasonably worried about who you're talking to might actually be their guilty conscience speaking through them. The third warning sign shows up in how language changes. Jung was fascinated by how our unconscious reveals itself through how we talk. When someone who used to say we and us suddenly switches to saying I and me all the time, they're unconsciously creating separation. Their hidden side is preparing for independence rather than partnership. A remarkable study from the University of Texas analyzed thousands of text messages between couples and found that this pronoun shift came before relationship breakdown in 87% of cases. It's as if the language itself becomes the first act of betrayal. The fourth and most revealing sign combines praising others while becoming emotionally unpredictable. This happens when your partner not only starts complimenting someone else's qualities while downplaying yours, but also shows wild mood swings that don't match what's happening. This combination isn't just annoying. It's your partner's hidden desires breaking through their normal personality. Here's a real example. Jessica noticed her boyfriend suddenly praising his gym trainer's amazing discipline and authenticity, while getting irritated when Jessica offered workout suggestions. Some days he'd be loving, others inexplicably cold. The pattern was clear. Admiration flowing outward while unpredictable emotions surfaced at home. This emotional roller coaster happens because the person is literally fighting with themselves internally. Their conscious mind says, "I'm committed to my relationship," while their shadow whispers, "But this other person makes me feel alive." This internal battle leaks out as overreactions, getting too angry about small issues or withdrawing when there's no obvious reason. When Jennifer's husband snapped at her for simply asking about his day, then apologized way too much afterward, she felt something was wrong. 3 weeks later, she found text messages revealing his emotional connection with a coworker. His excessive anger wasn't about Jennifer's question. It was his guilt speaking before he even consciously knew it himself. But what's really happening inside someone's mind when these changes occur? Jung proposed that every man carries within him an unconscious feminine side, and every woman carries an unconscious masculine side. These inner forces need expression, and when suppressed, they often come out through attraction to other people. This explains why someone might suddenly become obsessed with a person who seems completely different from their usual type. They're not actually falling for the person. They're falling for the projected parts of themselves they've never explored. Dr. James Hollis, who studies Jung's work, explains, "The strongest attractions aren't conscious choices but unconscious recognitions." The new person becomes a canvas for parts of the self that aren't expressed in the main relationship. But here's the key question. Is recognizing these signs enough to prevent betrayal? Jung believed that true relationship faithfulness requires more than just moral commitment. It demands psychological integration. We need to acknowledge and accept our shadow aspects rather than projecting them onto others. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves, Jung wrote. This means the very qualities that annoy us in our partners often reflect disowned parts of ourselves. A groundbreaking study from the University of Chicago showed that couples who engaged in shadow work, consciously exploring their disowned qualities, reported 62% higher relationship satisfaction and 78% fewer instances of cheating than couples who didn't. This suggests that the path to relationship fidelity isn't about stricter rules or more monitoring. It's about greater self-awareness and acceptance. Consider this example. Mark had always prided himself on being rational and logical. He criticized his wife's excessive emotions for years. But through working with a therapist, he discovered his own buried emotional needs. Needs he'd been unconsciously seeking to fulfill through flirting with colleagues. By acknowledging and accepting his emotional nature, Mark no longer needed outside validation. His relationships with female colleagues naturally became more appropriate, not through forced effort, but through self-understanding. This suggests a powerful truth. Faithfulness can't be forced from outside. it must grow from within. But how do we begin this healing process? And can a relationship be saved once these warning signs appear? Jung called the process of becoming complete individuation the lifelong journey of integrating conscious and unconscious aspects of ourselves. In relationships, this means moving beyond projections and seeing both ourselves and our partners clearly. The most powerful tool for this work is what Jung called active imagination, which is basically having an honest conversation with parts of yourself you normally ignore. Think of it like this. Imagine sitting down for coffee with your jealousy, your need for validation, or your desire for freedom. What would these parts say if they could speak? What do they actually want? It sounds strange, but it's surprisingly practical. One way to do this is through journaling, where you literally write a dialogue between your conscious self and the part that's causing problems. Imagine the shadowy impulse as a character with its own voice and motivation. You'd be shocked what comes up when you give these hidden parts permission to speak. When someone says, "I don't know why I did it," they're admitting their shadow has acted on its own. The healing process begins by asking, what part of me knows exactly why I did this? It's like being your own detective, investigating your motives with genuine curiosity rather than judgment. Harvard psychologist Dr. Elena Martinez studied couples recovering from cheating for 7 years and found something remarkable. The highest recovery rates occurred not in relationships where the betrayal was never discussed, nor in those where it dominated conversation forever, but in relationships where both partners explored the psychological patterns that created vulnerability to cheating in the first place. What's particularly interesting is how this process transforms not just the relationship, but the people in it. Partners who took this journey reported greater creative fulfillment, career success, and spiritual connection, benefits going far beyond just the relationship. But this journey isn't easy. It requires facing aspects of ourselves we've spent years, even decades, avoiding. Jung viewed relationship crises as potential awakening moments, what he called the dark night of the soul. When our shadows emerge through betrayal or conflict, we face a critical choice: keep projecting and blaming, or turn inward and grow. Thomas and Sarah's story illustrates this perfectly. After discovering Thomas's emotional affair with a coworker, Sarah's first instinct was to leave. But instead, they both committed to understanding the deeper patterns. Thomas realized he had been seeking validation for creative parts of himself that felt stifled in his corporate job, aspects his coworker seemed to recognize and appreciate. Rather than simply ending the inappropriate relationship, Thomas began addressing his creative suppression through writing and music, activities he'd abandoned years earlier. Sarah discovered she'd been playing a caretaker role while neglecting her own needs for passion and adventure. Together, they rebuilt their relationship on more honest foundations. 3 years later, they reported deeper intimacy than they'd ever experienced before the crisis. This doesn't mean betrayal is ever justified or necessary for growth. Rather, it suggests that the same psychological awareness that can prevent cheating can also heal its aftermath. But what if your partner shows no interest in this inner work? What if they keep saying, "I don't know why," without seeking deeper understanding? Jung distinguished between relationships with growth potential and those stuck in destructive patterns. The key difference isn't the presence of problems, but the willingness of both people to become aware of their contributions. When someone repeatedly says, "I don't know why I did it," without trying to understand their motivations, they're refusing the call to awareness. Jung would likely say that no relationship can thrive when one partner rejects self-awareness. Dr. Richard Thompson's research at Columbia University supports this view. His team found that relationships where only one partner engaged in psychological growth had an 83% failure rate within 3 years. Meanwhile, relationships where both partners committed to increasing awareness, even after serious betrayals, showed a 71% success rate over the same period. The critical factor wasn't how bad the problems were, but the mutual commitment to awareness. This brings us to perhaps the most important question. How can we apply these insights proactively before betrayal occurs? Jung believed that awareness is the greatest preventative medicine for relationship problems. By regularly examining our projections, triggers, and disowned qualities, we create relationships resistant to shadow takeovers. Try this exercise developed by Jung's followers. When you feel intensely triggered by your partner's behavior, ask yourself, how might this quality I'm reacting to relate to something I've disowned within myself? Then, explore how you might express this quality consciously rather than projecting it or acting it out unconsciously. For example, if you find yourself irritated by your partner's need for alone time, consider whether you've been denying your own need for personal space. By acknowledging and meeting this need consciously, you remove the power of unconscious forces to drive behavior. Research confirms this approach works. A major study followed 500 couples who practiced regular shadow check-ins. Conversations specifically designed to explore projections and triggers. These couples showed 64% lower cheating rates than comparison groups over a 10-year period. The most successful relationships aren't those without challenges. They're those where challenges become opportunities for greater awareness. Interestingly, Jung never equated relationship success with strict traditional arrangements. What concerned him was not the relationship structure, but the level of awareness brought to it. He believed that unconscious behavior, regardless of relationship style, leads to suffering. Some modern relationships incorporate this understanding through open relationships or other alternative structures. The key distinction Jung would emphasize is awareness versus unconsciousness. A consciously monogamous relationship has more in common with a consciously open one than either has with relationships driven by unconscious forces. This isn't about advocating any particular relationship style, but recognizing that awareness must come before structure. The question becomes not, how do we force faithfulness? But, how do we foster awareness? If you've recognized any warning signs we've discussed, don't panic. Awareness itself is the beginning of transformation. Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Start by examining your own shadow. Those qualities you find most irritating in others often point to disowned aspects of yourself. Then, create space for open conversation about emotional needs, fears, and dreams with your partner. Remember that phrase, "I don't know why I did it," signals an opportunity for deeper understanding, not just a cause for alarm. The appropriate response isn't accusation, but curiosity. Let's discover why together. Couples who establish regular check-ins to discuss emotional distances, projections, and unexpressed needs report the highest relationship satisfaction. These conversations aren't always comfortable, but they create space for awareness to flourish where shadows previously operated. Consider how different our approach to relationship faithfulness becomes through this lens. Rather than monitoring behavior, we focus on nurturing awareness. Rather than demanding promises, we invite exploration. The path to fidelity runs through understanding our unconscious, bringing shadows into the light rather than enforcing rules. As we finish exploring Jung's insights on faithfulness, remember this: the most dangerous betrayals aren't physical actions, but unconscious ones. When someone says, "I don't know why I did it," they're revealing the fundamental problem, not the cheating itself, but the unconsciousness behind it. True relationship security comes not from controlling behavior, but from illuminating shadows. Not from preventing external actions, but from integrating internal fragments. Jung offers us this profound wisdom. Knowledge of the shadow gives us a realistic humility. For we then know that we are common members of the human community, not superior beings who stand alone. Perhaps the greatest protection against cheating is the humble recognition of our capacity for it, and the conscious integration of the needs and qualities that might otherwise drive us to it unconsciously. If you've gained value from these insights, please share this video with someone who might benefit. And if you're navigating these waters yourself, remember that awareness, not perfection, is the goal. The most important relationship question isn't will we ever face challenges, but will we face them consciously, together? Until next time, may your relationships be not just faithful, but fully aware.